With the Suicide Squad soft reboot hot off the presses, it had me wondering, why do reboots even exist? We hear the terms remakes, reboots, and reimaginings thrown around, but what are the differences and why do we keep seeing them come out? The answer may shock you. No, I'm just kidding, but it's really interesting to dive into. But before we dive in, I just want to mention that if you're interested in videos about movies, TV shows, and anything film industry related, make sure to subscribe to FilmStack. We're almost at the huge channel milestone of 100 subscribers, and it's super exciting. So with that out of the way, cue the intro. Other than reduce, reuse, and recycle, I don't think you can name a more iconic trio of words starting with the letter R than remakes, reboots, and reimaginings. But what is the difference between the three of these things? Let's go over them really quickly before talking about why each of them exists. To start off, let's talk about remakes. A remake is a film that recreates one particular film. Whether it's recreating another film as closely as possible but in a different language like The Departed did with Infernal Affairs, or just recreating a movie with a more modern twist like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory did to Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, these are considered remakes. The plot, characters, and format should be the same as the original, but language and modernization are allowed if you still want to consider it a remake. Some other notable remakes are The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo or Let the Right One In. A reboot is a movie or series of movies that resets the chronology of an established film series. We tend to see this very often with superhero movies, some notable examples being Christopher Nolan's Batman, or as a matter of fact, the multiple Batman reboots, and the multiple Spiderman reboots as well. But it doesn't just apply to superhero movies. We've seen franchise reboots with Planet of the Apes and possibly James Bond, unless all of the theories of a continuous timeline are correct. Reboots are a great way to restart a well-established or even finished series of movies with a new storyline, new characters, and new feel, among other things. And finally, we have reimaginings. Reimaginings can be confused with remakes, but they are very different. Where a remake is usually a one-to-one copy of a movie with some minor changes here and there, a reimagining is often a completely different version of the same story, but either in a different medium or with some different plot elements. Some perfect examples of reimaginings are all of the live-action Disney movies such as Jungle Book, The Lion King, and Mulan. Their stories are told in a completely different medium. In Disney's case, it's live action, and oftentimes with some different plot elements or characters. It's generally the same story, but reimagined, hence the name. Okay, now that we know what they are and what the differences are, we can discuss why the heck do they even exist. And yes, many times when dealing with questions about why something exists in Hollywood, the answer comes down to dollar bills. But there is so much more to the story than that. Yes, money is a huge driver in Hollywood. Why wouldn't it be? Every movie is an investment that aims to make money. The film industry is an industry that is driven by profits and is always looking for ways to make more. When you have a well-established franchise or movie that is loved by many, it's almost a no-brainer that you'd want to do more with it. And other than sequels and prequels, the 3 R's as I'll call it are another way to bring movies to a new or wider audience or just milk some more of that cash cow. When it comes to remakes, sometimes a director or actor will push for a movie to be remade because they are either passionate or love that movie so much that remaking it would be considered a dream come true. But from what I can tell, the usual reason for remakes being made is because of the potential financial gain. People often associate newer with better. In the world of video games, newer games with better graphics are often looked at as better games, even though that's not always true. And when it comes to movies, I know a lot of people who completely shy away from watching either foreign or black and white movies. Heck, I even know people who won't watch a movie that has a bit of film grain because it's considered to be too old. Now, this isn't the case with everyone, but enough people have this mindset that sometimes remaking a classic or foreign film that has a lot of hype and critical acclaim is enough to bring audiences to theaters. Besides that, remakes are usually a lower risk investment versus creating some new intellectual property because the story has already been tried and tested. It's a lot easier to create a remake from a storytelling perspective because you basically have everything laid out for you. You don't need to spend months writing a script and forming a story because one already exists and you either just need to translate it or polish it up a bit. But on the flip side of it being a low risk investment, if the original has a big following behind it, the creators of the remake have to tread lightly. There have been many times where remakes have flopped. either because they are worse versions of the original or because it's obvious that the studio is just trying to capitalize on some already popular IP. One notable example is the 1998 remake of Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. The original Psycho is still considered to be one of the greatest horror films of all time, and the remake was almost a shot-for-shot recreation of the original and starred Vince Vaughn. But unfortunately, it wasn't able to capture the original's magic and ended up being generally disliked by critics, only bringing in $37.2 million at the box office on a budget of $60 million. There are a bunch of examples of remakes that flopped, but I doubt we'll stop seeing them anytime soon because when you look at a film like The Departed, which brought in almost $292 million at the box office on a budget of only $90 million, it's still a no-brainer for most studios, considering the usually reduced workload to create one. When a studio owns some intellectual property that is almost guaranteed to earn you money, but you've concluded the storyline, what do? You reboot it. You bring in a new cast, a new director, new story, and start again, giving the viewers a new experience in the same universe. Like I mentioned earlier, reboots are very common, but not exclusive to the superhero genre. Superhero movies have a huge fan base behind them. Take just one look at Comic-Con or any superhero movie trailer and you'll see just how many loyal fans there are, and studios know this. That's why when you see someone like Christopher Nolan conclude the story for his version of Batman, you pretty much have no choice but to reboot the franchise and start the story again, especially when it's a huge moneymaker. Spider-Man, Planet of the Apes, Superman, Batman, heck, even the MCU have either received or will receive a franchise reboot. Reboots are great because they allow beloved characters and stories to be portrayed in different ways. And the reason I keep referring back to the Batman franchise is because of how many different versions of Batman have existed on the big screen. Michael Keaton's Batman gave us a dark and grimy look at Gotham. Christian Bale's Batman gave us a very realistic look of what Batman could look like in a modern world. And with George Clooney's Batman, we got a suit with nipples that is so beloved by all Batman fans alike. And there are even more versions that I haven't mentioned. It was similar with Spider-Man. We had the Sam Raimi Trilogy, which is sometimes considered to be the start of the modern age of superhero films, and left every kid on the playground pretending to be shooting webs at each other and sometimes even climbing walls. Andrew Garfield gave us a more emo and punkish Spider-Man. Well, not more emo than this, but more emo than what you would usually think when you think of Spider-Man. And now we have Tom Holland suiting up and giving us yet another version of this character. But reboots don't always exist because a story has concluded. Sometimes they're almost necessary. If you look at the most recent Suicide Squad, it is considered to be a soft reboot because it shares some of the same characters and I assume is in the same universe as the original. But this movie wasn't made because Suicide Squad finished its story and wanted to start anew. It was made because the original was received so poorly and is now even mocked as one of the worst comic book movies. It would have been very difficult to try and continue the original story. The first one made a huge mess of things because of its different directors and last-minute reshoots. At the time of writing the script, I haven't watched the newest Suicide Squad, but I heard it's pretty good, so I'm pretty excited to check it out. So, no spoilers in the comments, please. And finally, another reason why reboots are sometimes made is to avoid losing the rights to a particular IP. From what I know, this was the case with the newest Fantastic Four movie. That movie was a flop. But then again, the other ones weren't that good either. 21st Century Fox didn't want to lose the rights to Fantastic Four, so they pumped out a movie just to keep those rights. Oftentimes, when a film studio or game studio purchases the rights to make movies or games with a certain IP, there's a clause in the contract that states they have to create at least one movie or one game every so often to retain the rights. And finally, we have Reimaginings. There's not much to say about this one. The general idea for these existing is almost identical to remakes. It allows studios to milk the movie cash cow yet again without having to recreate an entire story. Yes, the story and character are often changed a decent amount in Reimaginings, but the biggest differences are usually in the format. The most notable examples of this are the recent live-action Disney Reimaginings. The Lion King, The Jungle Book, Mulan, Aladdin, and Beauty and the Beast are reimaginings of the original animated movies. They brought films that were beloved by millions to a more modern audience. And when you look at the reviews for these movies, the general consensus is that they didn't really manage to capture the same charm or magic as the originals, but they still managed to make a buttload of money. And I imagine more of these reimaginings will continue to come out in the future. Hopefully you learned in this video that Hollywood loves money. I'm just kidding. We already knew that. But when you take a step back and look at it in general, I don't think the 3 R's are a bad thing. As long as the creators, cast, and actors are passionate about the original IP and want to deliver a good experience versus just cashing it in, I have no problem with any of the 3 R's. There are a lot of actors, directors, prop makers, digital artists, and more that love movies and would love to work on a project that involves them either recreating a film for a modern audience or rebooting a beloved franchise. One of the best examples in my mind is always Christopher Nolan's Batman. The Dark Knight is one of my favorite superhero movies, and it's because a lot of care went into it, not just the goal of collecting a paycheck. Thanks for watching. If you haven't subscribed to FilmStack yet, please hit the subscribe button. It means a lot to me, and this channel is almost at the really big milestone, at least for me, of 100 subscribers, and it's super exciting. If you have any other video suggestions, I'm always open to hearing about them, so make sure to leave a comment. Until next time, have a good one.